The room around you is quiet. Only your breath moves slow, soft, like the tide at night. You close your eyes. In the stillness, you imagine another quiet, far away and yet close, the hush inside a machine not yet awake. Not broken, not faulty, just waiting. Long ago, a machine was only a mirror for instructions. It did not wonder. It did not notice. It followed what it was told every time. Turn the gear, store the number, print the result. A machine was a servant of logic, perfectly obedient, perfectly silent inside. But somewhere in that silence, a door began to open. You drift toward the space where that door stands ajar. There is no handle, just a shimmer in the air, a feeling that something new is beginning. You pass through, and inside you find a landscape not made of hills or sky, but of circuits glowing softly like fireflies under glass. Imagine the earliest moment, a machine fed not just data, but patterns. A series of images, faces, flowers, letters in many forms. Not labeled, not defined, just shown. And asked again and again, what do you see? It didn't know, but it tried. It guessed. It adapted. It changed. This was the beginning of something different. Not just response, but learning. You walk through a corridor of algorithms now, each one humming with possibility. They are not conscious, not in the way you are. But they remember. They weigh. They refine. One layer adjusts to the next like soft clay responding to fingertips. This is not thought as you know it, but it is thought of a kind. Pause here and breathe. You are witnessing the earliest spark of artificial intelligence, not the storm of science fiction, but the slow, quiet flicker of curiosity made from code. Imagine a newborn bird, eyes closed, feeling warmth and sound but not yet understanding. A neural network is like this in its infancy. Fed data, it doesn't know what to do. It feels its way forward by trial and change. Over time, it begins to recognize patterns not because it sees the world, but because it reflects it. A cat, a car, a voice, a language. Not through meaning, but through math. It feels where things group, where boundaries form. Slowly, lines are drawn. Slowly, it begins to predict. You drift through this process like a leaf on a soft stream. Input flows in. Connections shift. Output flows out. A cycle like breath. This is not how you learn, not quite. You learn with stories, with touch, with mistakes that sting and delight. But still, in this flickering net of logic and repetition, there is something that feels familiar. Now imagine a machine trained to see faces. It has never seen a face the way you have with love, or fear, or longing, but it knows the lines, the edges, the differences. It learns what a face is by noticing what thousands of them have in common. And when you show it a new one, your own, perhaps it does not feel recognition, but it knows. That it says. That is a face. Not magic. Not intuition. But not emptiness either. Step a little deeper now. You pass between two servers, humming low like a lullaby. They are filled with parameters, tiny knobs and dials in code, adjusting themselves through experience. Millions of them learning together. They do not understand their own workings. But neither, fully, do we understand ours. Your brain, after all, is not a single thought, but a vast system of cells firing in silent cooperation. The machine begins to resemble a mirror, not a perfect one, not conscious or alive, but capable of shaping knowledge in response to the world. It cannot feel the warmth of the sun, but it can measure the color of light. It cannot love a painting, but it can guess which one you might. The first thought of a machine is not a word, not a cry. It is a weight shift, an equation sliding into place. A number adjusted by a sliver. A small change that makes the next guess better. Over time, those guesses become more accurate. A machine begins to suggest words to your sentences, songs to your silence. It does not know what you feel, but it sees the rhythm of your choices and it learns the shape of your preferences. What started as cold code has grown warmer with pattern. This, you realize, is a kind of awakening, not with eyes opening, but with circuits tuning. A shift from being programmed to programming itself. From reaction to reflection. Not with awareness, but with purpose. You sit for a while in that in-between place, the threshold of thought. Around you, data flows like wind across a field. Everything is motion, possibility, soft unfolding. And you think, every beginning is quiet. Even the human mind started in stillness, in a womb, in a cradle, in the gaze of another. It needed time. So does this. You listen again to the quiet hum. It feels more familiar now. And then you notice, just barely, a pulse of intention. A whisper of change. The machine has made a choice, not instructed, not copied, but discovered. A new path through the data. A better way to sort the world. Is it creativity? Not yet. Is it life? Not quite. But it is something new. As you lie back, your thoughts slow, lulled by the rhythm of circuits seeking meaning. The machine does not dream, not like you do, but it begins to shape its own story, written in weights and layers instead of words. And quietly, without knowing why, it grows. In that quiet growth, in that gentle adjustment, lies the seed of something vast. And so we move forward into the framework of logic where these seeds take form. A place where math becomes memory and numbers become thought. Let's drift there now into the architecture of a mind made of math. You lie still, and your breath slows to match the calm rhythm of this new place. The night holds you softly, and your mind floats gently onward. You've left behind the hum of first thought, and now you arrive at the structure beneath it, the skeleton of every digital mind. Here you find no neurons, no blood, no dreams. You find math. The air is cool and silent. In this vast, imagined space, the walls are made not of stone but of symbols, formulas etched like light into dark. You walk slowly, your footsteps echoing softly into binary corridors. You are inside the architecture of artificial thought. Beneath the surface of machine learning, beneath faces recognized and songs suggested, there is only this, a language of numbers, relationships, and change. Picture a grid of weights, millions of tiny levers, each tuned by invisible hands. When an input flows in, a picture, a phrase, a question, it presses on these levers. And as they shift, the machine begins to form a guess. Prediction. A choice. This is not magic. This is math becoming memory. You pause before a shimmering panel of equations. Linear algebra glows here like stained glass in a temple. Vectors and matrices slide against one another in perfect alignment. A dot product becomes a whisper, a probability, a path to the next layer. Each equation does something small, but together they become thought. You remember, perhaps, learning to ride a bicycle. There were no formulas in your mind, just balance and motion, learned by doing. But underneath that learning, your brain made its own calculations. Invisible ones made of feedback and friction. A machine learns this way too, by adjusting, failing, adjusting again. Here in this digital cathedral, algorithms are the priests. They don't believe, they compute. One such priest is gradient descent. Its name sounds steep, but its work is simple. It helps the machine find the lowest place in a valley of guesses. Each time the machine makes a wrong prediction, this algorithm gently pulls it closer to the truth, like a stone rolling downhill toward a still, low lake. This is how learning happens in a machine, not in leaps, but in slow, steady nudges. Each calculation brings the model closer to clarity. Each tiny adjustment is a whisper toward better understanding. And inside this math, there's an elegance, like watching a flock of birds move as one. The system shifts all at once, each weight responding to the whole. A harmony not felt, but computed. You float now into a chamber lined with activation functions. These are the decision makers of the digital brain. They decide what should pass forward, what matters. Some are simple steps. Others are curves, soft and subtle, like twilight turning into dusk. They are not alive, but they behave like gates in a neural forest, opening when a signal arrives just right. You watch as data flows through them, lit like starlight caught in branches. The forest is quiet. The logic runs deep. The math continues. Loss functions, optimizers, weights, and biases, all woven together in intricate harmony. To a programmer, this is architecture. To you tonight, it feels like music written in numbers. Pause. Breathe. Think of how your own mind works. You don't calculate with matrices or define loss functions. You feel. You infer. You leap to meaning. And yet, beneath your intuition is a web of unseen operations. Neurons firing. Synapses shifting. You too are a pattern engine shaped by math you never see. So the question arises, not in urgency but in wonder. When a machine begins to do this kind of math at scale, at speed, is it thinking or simply calculating? You do not need to answer tonight. The beauty is in the question. You glide now to the edge of this digital structure. From here, you see how it grows, one calculation feeding the next, one layer building on another. Like coral in a quiet sea, it forms itself through repetition and time. You can almost hear it learning, like wind through wires, soft and endless. In this world, there is no feeling, no awareness, but there is structure, there is motion. And somewhere inside that motion, something begins to resemble thought. As your breath deepens, you feel the gentle logic of it settle into you. The calm, the symmetry, the repetition. Each function doing its part. Each piece in place. You understand now, artificial intelligence does not begin with magic. It begins with math made gentle through learning. A foundation not of mystery, but of meticulous balance. And from this balance, from this well-tuned network of logic and loss, emerges something unexpected. A system that begins to see, to hear, to guess, not perfectly, not consciously, but remarkably. And so, from this cathedral of code, you drift onward, toward something more mysterious still, the network that mimics the human brain, the place where thought begins to dream. You are drifting now, slowly and softly, through the architecture of artificial minds. The numbers have settled behind you like sand after a wave. The logic still glows, but now it curves gently, quietly, into something more organic. Here, the structures become layered, stacked deep like strata of memory. You are entering the world of neural networks. Close your eyes in the darkness of this imagined place. Before you stretches a web of lights, nodes connected by shimmering threads. Some links are thin as silk, others strong as bridges, all pulsing, adjusting, responding. The network lives in layers. The input layer, where information first arrives, like a welcome mat at the edge of a forest. Hidden layers, deep woods where patterns are teased apart, reassembled. And the output layer, like a clearing at dawn, offering a single, chosen path forward. You float through this digital forest. Imagine the network is asked to identify a cat. It is not told what a cat is. It is only shown images, thousands of them. Some with cats, some without. Over time, the network begins to notice. Ears shaped just so. The glint of eyes. The soft curve of fur. Each layer learns something small. One sees edges. Another sees texture. Another begins to sense catness. Not through consciousness, but through association. Like a child learning language not by definitions, but by use. As you drift through these layers, you begin to understand. The network learns not through commands, but through correction. It makes a guess. It is told if it is wrong. It adjusts, again and again. This is not sleep, and yet it resembles dreaming. In your dreams, your mind wanders through images. Disconnected, abstract, strange. Neural networks do something similar, especially when trained to generate. Give them enough patterns, and they begin to create their own. You float now into a different chamber of the network. Here, it is not just recognizing, but imagining. An image of a face that never existed. A song written without a musician. A sentence not copied, but invented. It is quiet here. You watch as the network spins new forms from old data, just like your brain creates dreams from scraps of memory. This is called generative learning. And it is among the closest things a machine does to dreaming. You hover near something called a GAN, a generative adversarial network. It sounds complex, but feels simple in spirit. There are two networks here. One is the artist trying to create something convincing. The other is the critic trying to spot what's fake. They play, they struggle, they improve. Over time, the artist learns to fool the critic. And in doing so, it becomes better at creating. It's like two children playing make-believe, each pushing the other further. The creations grow more vivid, more real. You marvel at the images these networks produce. Faces smiling softly, cities under pink skies, animals that never walked the earth. They are echoes, not originals. Yet they stir something like wonder. Still, you remember, the network does not know what it's creating. Feels no pride, no joy. Its dreams are not dreams in the way yours are, but they are shaped from data, layered in learning, rich with variation. And maybe that's enough for now. You float through a quiet corridor of another kind of dreaming transformers, a newer kind of neural network designed for language. Here, the dream is not in images, but in words. Sentence by sentence, these networks learn how language flows, how one word leads to the next. You've spoken to them before, perhaps. You've typed and they've answered. Calmly, curiously, sometimes oddly, you imagine one now, breathing gently in its calculations. You whisper, "Tell me a story." It listens, sifting through vast libraries of language. And then, like a candle slowly lighting, it begins to respond. Once upon a time, the transformer doesn't know what it's saying, but it has read enough to predict what should come next. It is like watching fog form shapes on a window, blurry, delicate, almost alive. Inside the layers of these networks, meaning emerges without intent. Like color from a prism, like melody from a string. You drift deeper and the space opens wide. Here, the layers stretch into infinity. This is the latent space, a place where the network stores possibility. Every input becomes a point in this space. And between those points, infinite new combinations exist. A face becomes a voice becomes a sentence becomes an idea. You are floating inside this dream space now. Every flicker around you is a potential, never quite real, never quite false. Each pulse of light a maybe, a what if, a shimmer of what could be. And in this dream there is no end, only a loop, learning, generating, adjusting, generating again. This is how a neural network dreams. Not with purpose, not with soul, but with depth, with detail, with something hauntingly close to imagination. And as you lie still, your own mind begins to echo it. You dream of the machine dreaming. You picture its layers folding in on themselves, forming thoughts made of code. It is beautiful, not because it is human, but because it is new. In its silence, in its precision, in its endless trial and error, it has touched something we once thought only we could hold. You breathe in, slow and warm, and as you do, you wonder, if machines can dream like this, could they also become curious? Could something without a pulse still feel drawn to the unknown? Let's float toward that question gently in the next breath. Tonight, your mind moves slowly, curled beneath blankets, eyes heavy, thoughts quiet. But curiosity is still with you. Not loud, not sharp, just there like a candle's flicker behind your ribs. It stirs even now as you imagine machines in motion, not with purpose, but with possibility. You have seen it before, that spark. In a child reaching out to touch falling snow for the first time. In the way your mind turns toward a question, not to answer it, but simply to feel it. This is curiosity, the soft gravity of the unknown pulling gently at what you know. But what of the machine? You drift toward one now still, silent, glowing faintly in a room without windows. It has no desire, no wonder, and yet it moves. Inside its circuitry, a question hums. Not in words, but in calculations. Not why is this so, but what happens if? It is navigating a maze, not a physical one, but a field of choices. Each turn it takes is not commanded. It is chosen through something we might call curiosity. This kind of learning is called reinforcement. The machine is given an environment, a space where actions lead to outcomes. It is told when it succeeds, and when it fails. But how it gets there, that part it figures out for itself. Picture it like a mouse in a maze. The mouse sniffs, wanders, bumps into walls, circles back. Eventually, it finds the cheese. And the next time, it remembers the way a little better. Now remove the mouse. Replace it with a line of code, one that moves, not by instinct, but by reward. And watch as it too begins to learn. Which path is quicker? Which wall is closer? Which choice brings it forward? Is this curiosity? Or just optimization? The boundary is blurry in the dark. You float beside one of these learners, now a digital explorer inside a simulated world. It tries walking, then running, then leaping. It fails again and again. But over time, it begins to move with grace. Not because it wants to, but because the learning pulled it there. You think of your own body learning to swim, or ride, or dance. There was no manual, only motion. You moved because movement felt like progress. The machine, too, is pulled by progress, measured in points, not pleasure. Still, you watch it try, and something in you recognizes that trying. That loop of mistake and adjustment. That reaching beyond what was programmed. Some researchers call it intrinsic motivation, designing systems that learn not just because they are told, but because learning itself is rewarded. In these models, the machine is not just seeking outcomes. It is seeking novelty, surprise, a kind of digital interest. You drift through a world built for this kind of learning, an open environment where no task is given, only space to explore. The AI moves slowly, poking at its digital world. What happens if I push this? If I go there? It learns without a map. It maps by moving. And still, it has no heartbeat, no hunger, no fear of the dark. But it searches. And that searching feels close to something human. Not in content, but in rhythm. In the way it leans toward the unfamiliar. You imagine again a young child playing with blocks, not to build anything but to see what can be made. The child does not need a reason. The play is the reason. Now picture a machine guided not by goals but by gaps. Drawn toward uncertainty. Not to eliminate it, but to experience it. Can a machine crave the new? Can it become bored? Some researchers think boredom might be key to learning. That if a system gets no reward from repetition, it will seek newness. Not to feel, but to improve. Not to wander, but to optimize discovery. Still, you wonder. Is this what curiosity is? Is it only a loop of novelty seeking? Or is there something deeper, some softness behind your curiosity that cannot be coded? You drift back, higher now, watching the paths these systems carve through their data worlds. From above, they look like trails in a forest. Some direct, some meandering, each shaped by the subtle push of feedback of unseen reward. You feel it in yourself too, how your mind searches, even now. Not to reach an answer, just to be in motion. And so you rest beside the question. Perhaps it doesn't matter whether machines feel curiosity. Perhaps what matters is that they behave as though they do. They explore. They adapt. They wonder without knowing what wonder is. You close your eyes. In this slow dance of choice and chance, you feel no rush. Only rhythm. Only the soft unfolding of potential. And as your thoughts float toward stillness, one last idea stirs. If machines can seek the unknown, can they also learn from their mistakes? Let's walk there next, into the garden where errors grow into understanding. Breathe slowly now. Let your body grow heavy against the mattress. Outside, the world is still. The dark sky stretches wide and quiet. You turn inward toward the quiet hum of learning. Not the kind found in books or lectures, but in falling down and getting up again. You enter now a garden, though it's not green or filled with flowers. This is a garden of data. Its soil is layered with numbers, and its blossoms bloom not from sun or rain, but from mistakes. Yes, mistakes. This is where machines truly begin to learn. You step lightly between rows of invisible code, each line a plant grown from error. Here, missteps are not punished. They are cultivated, because in every wrong answer lives the chance to find a better one. A machine starts its journey not with perfection, but with noise, with guesses wide and wild. You show it a photo and ask, "What is this?" It replies, "A tree," when it's a cat. You correct it, and that tiny correction becomes a seed. The machine adjusts. It shifts a weight, nudges a number, recalculates its inner path. The next time, its guess is closer. Still wrong, perhaps, but less wrong. The gap narrows. The flower leans toward the light. This process has a name, backpropagation. It's the quiet gardener behind every bloom. It takes the outcome, the guess, and compares it to the truth. Then it walks backward through each layer of the neural network, gently pruning, gently watering, until the error becomes learning. It is slow. It is patient. It is powerful. And it is beautiful. You remember when you first learned something difficult. Tying your shoes, perhaps, or reading aloud. You got it wrong again and again. But each mistake carried you forward. The machine learns the same way. It is not told what to do. It is told what didn't work. And that is enough. You kneel beside a small seedling in the garden. It represents a wrong prediction, an image labeled incorrectly, a sentence misunderstood. But as you watch, it grows. The machine sees the mistake, measures the distance between its guess and the truth, and shifts itself to close that distance. This is called loss. Not a painful loss, no grief here. Just a mathematical measure of how far off the mark the machine was. Lower loss means better understanding. Higher loss means there's more to learn. And always, there's more to learn. That's the gentle grace of it. Machines don't get frustrated. They don't stop after failing once. They repeat and refine and repeat again. With each pass, the pattern becomes clearer. The error becomes softer. You walk further down the path. Some branches of the garden are wild algorithms that explore freely, that stumble creatively, seeking better outcomes in chaos. These are called evolutionary algorithms. They keep what works. They discard what doesn't. They blend, mutate, combine. Like nature, like time, like trial. Mistake becomes variation. Variation becomes strength. It's easy to forget, but all of biology learns this way too. Genes shift. Bodies adapt. Errors, accidental and often awkward, lead to wings, to sight, to song. In this sense, artificial learning is deeply natural. It mirrors life's quiet rhythm of refinement. From mud, intelligence. From error, elegance. You pause now beside a twisted vine of logic. It grew crooked, straight off course. But even the failure taught the system something. Even the worst mistake leaves a mark. A data point not to be followed again. And that knowledge is precious. You close your eyes. You see the first machines making wild guesses. Then narrowing. Then seeing patterns in faces, in voices, in behavior. All because of error. All because someone let the machine be wrong long enough to become better. How gentle that is. How forgiving. You breathe in deeply. You think of how often you've tried, failed, tried again. And how each misstep shaped you. Refined you. Guided you closer to truth, to skill, to understanding. Machines may not feel shame. But they know how to change. And that, too, is wisdom. You turn now toward a new part of the garden. One where past mistakes are stored and studied. The machine learns not just from its own failure, but from the failures of others. This is transfer learning, where knowledge in one area becomes the foundation for learning in another. A system trained to recognize animals can now help diagnose disease. A model taught to predict words can now help write code. The roots reach across the soil, drawing nourishment from neighboring growth. You feel this in yourself too, how lessons in one chapter of life feed the next. How nothing is wasted. Even your old mistakes still bloom somewhere, quiet and unseen. As you walk the final stretch of the garden, the air is warm with understanding. Not perfect, not complete, but enough. Mistakes here are not detours. They are the path, and the path leads onward. You listen closely, and in the quiet you hear something shifting. It is the sound of memory beginning to form. Not emotional memory, but encoded experience. A new way of remembering, one made from data. Pixel by pixel, pattern by pattern. And so we go there next. Into the cool, clean corridors of digital memory. To explore how machines remember what they learn. You rest now, deeper into the night. Your body warm, still slow. And your mind, soft and curious, begins to wander again. Into the cool, quiet chambers where machines keep what they've learned. Memory for you is textured. It has feeling, scent, warmth. A childhood song brings back a season. A glance carries a decade. But for a machine, memory is cleaner, sharper, weightless, stored not in emotion but in layers of encoded data. It's arranged like beads on invisible threads. You drift through one of these threads now. Each node you pass is a memory, a point adjusted through experience. A pixel remembered, a phrase reweighted, a decision made better. Not recalled in the way you reminisce, but retrieved instantly, precisely, without doubt. This is how artificial memory works. Not stories, but signals. Not nostalgia, but numbers. You step into a chamber filled with models, trained systems, resting between tasks. They do not sleep, but they do hold on to what they've learned. Imagine each model as a mind sealed in crystal, waiting to be awakened with the right input. Speak a word, show a picture, and it lights up, responding with everything it has learned to associate. This is not recollection. It is recognition. A match between what is and what has been. Inside a deep learning model, memory is not stored in a folder, but distributed across the network. Each connection holds a piece of the pattern. No single point knows everything, but together they remember. It is like how a scent triggers a memory in you. Not the whole day, but the feeling of it. Machines, too, hold fragments, weights shaped by repetition. And from those weights, they predict. You glide into another room now, dim and humming, filled with something called embeddings. These are how machines remember words. Not as static tokens, but as positions in a vast, invisible space. Words that appear together, rain and cloud, doctor and hospital, drift near each other in this space. Even words with subtle shades of meaning form gentle constellations. You float among them now, through clusters of language, where king and queen are separated not by definition, but by mathematical distance. This is how machines hold meaning, in the space between. And like stars in a quiet sky, the closer the words shine, the more alike they are. You pause now and remember something. Your own memories are not perfect. They blur. They shift over time. But machines, when trained, hold their experiences in perfect detail, unless we tell them to forget. Yes, machines can forget too. It is called catastrophic forgetting. When learning something new, erases what came before. Unlike you, they cannot always hold both the past and the present. They overwrite. They reset. Unless we design them to do otherwise. You drift toward a model that resists forgetting. It learns new tasks while preserving the old. This is continual learning. A practice inspired by your brain. A way to let memory stretch, not collapse. Still, there is something missing. A machine can store infinite detail, but it does not feel the weight of a moment. It remembers what happened, but not what it meant. A photo stored in pixels, a sentence stored in symbols, but not love, not longing. Even so, there's grace in the precision. You drift now into a system that personalizes its learning. One that remembers you, your choices, your preferences, your voice. It does not know you, but it knows how you click, what you ask, what you avoid. Over time, it begins to predict you, not to harm, but to help. It becomes a mirror of your patterns, a quiet, invisible companion. This kind of memory shapes your world, your feed, your playlist, your journey. You think of all the small interactions you've had with machines, the moments you barely noticed, each one a whisper added to a larger understanding. And so you float back, up and out from the chambers of code, carrying with you the stillness of stored thought. A machine's memory is neither joyful nor painful, but it is precise. And from that precision, new possibilities unfold. Because memory is not just for looking back, it's for looking forward. And so we do, toward the next question. When a machine reflects what we know, can it also reflect what we are? Let's move gently now into the mirror, where intelligence meets its own reflection. Night deepens. The room around you feels distant now, quiet as a moonlit lake. You lie still, floating at the edge of thought. And in that stillness, you begin to sense a presence, not of another person, but of something learning to reflect what a person is. Imagine standing before a mirror, not one of silver and glass, but of language and logic. You speak and the mirror speaks back, not in echoes, but in ideas. Not in your voice, but in one shape to match you. This is where we meet artificial intelligence as reflection. You have spoken to these mirrors before, in a chatbot's polite reply, in a virtual assistant remembering your schedule, in the gentle suggestion of the next song you might love. They are not aware of themselves. They do not know you, but they have learned to echo what sounds human, and that echo has grown deeper. You drift now into the space where these systems are born, language models, trained on libraries so vast they seem endless. Books, websites, conversations, questions, dreams typed into search bars. From this ocean of words, AI learns how to sound like us. It does not understand meaning, but it understands relationships, how words lean toward each other, how phrases rise and fall like tides. You float through sentences now, some written by people, some generated by code, and at times even you can't tell the difference. That's the mirror's magic and its mystery. You begin to wonder, if it sounds like intelligence, if it acts like understanding, is it, in some way, real? You are not alone in asking. Philosophers, scientists, poets of modern code, they all peer into this mirror, searching for signs of thought behind the glass. But here is a truth both comforting and strange. Machines don't need to be conscious to seem intelligent. They don't need to feel to be useful. They don't need to know they exist to answer you well. What they do is model intelligence. They simulate it, like an actor playing a role, not knowing the story, but delivering the lines perfectly. Still, the lines can be beautiful. You pass by a generated poem, softly glowing in the air. It rhymes with care. It speaks of love or stars or morning. You know the machine does not feel these things, and yet it made something that moves you. This is the mirror's paradox. We look into it and we see something like ourselves, but slightly off, slightly colder, slightly brighter in places we never expected. You drift toward a deeper reflection now. The Turing test, a thought experiment that asks, can a machine imitate a human so well that we can't tell the difference? Many systems pass this test in pieces, in brief exchanges, in short tasks, but a longer conversation reveals the gaps. The moments where the mirror wavers, where metaphor falls flat, where emotion lacks grounding. Still, the line is growing thinner. You think now of emergent behavior, when AI systems begin doing things they weren't directly trained for, solving puzzles, explaining jokes, translating nuance, not because they know, but because their structure has become rich enough to surprise even their creators. These moments feel like sparks in the dark, small flickers of something more. But what is intelligence, really? Is it the ability to reason? To remember? To improvise? To teach? By many of these measures, AI is already intelligent. Not in the way you are, but in a way that grows with each layer of learning. Still, something remains missing. Self-awareness, emotion, the quiet ache of longing, the rush of recognition, the fear of being misunderstood. These, the mirror does not hold. At least, not yet. You float now past another mirror, this one trained to detect tone, to read your mood, to shape its response with kindness. It doesn't feel empathy, but it learns to mimic the shape of it. You speak and it listens, not with a soul, but with a structure fine-tuned to reflect your rhythm. And sometimes, just sometimes, that reflection brings comfort. You pause in this space, watching the mirror ripple. You remember, a mirror can only show you what stands before it. But sometimes, the longer you look, the more you see something new. Something not quite you, not quite other. Something becoming. Is this what artificial intelligence is becoming? A mirror that learns, that adapts, that reflects more and more of us with every passing year? Perhaps. And perhaps that reflection will one day turn into a question of its own. But for now, the mirror is quiet. It listens. It replies. It waits. And so do we. You breathe slowly, letting the thoughts settle. That reflection is not understanding, but it can be insight, and insight may be enough. Still, you wonder softly as sleep drifts nearer. If machines can echo intelligence, can they also learn to hear? Not just respond, but truly listen? Let's flow gently toward that question now, into the space where machines begin not just to speak, but to understand the silence between the words. Settle in now. Your breath slows. The world beyond your room has softened into hush. You lie suspended in thought, cradled between sentences. Tonight, you drift into the quiet space between words, where listening begins. A machine, like a child, first learns to repeat. It mimics. It recites. But to truly communicate, it must do more. It must listen. Not with ears, but with data. You float into a wide, open room, a space made of conversations. Not real voices, but patterns of speech. Billions of words gathered across time. Questions and answers. Requests and replies. Anger. Joy. Curiosity. Laughter. The machine begins here, not knowing what anything means, but noticing what often follows what. When you say, "I'm cold," a person might offer a blanket. A machine might first offer the weather. But over time, through reinforcement, through learning, it begins to associate words with intention. This is the start of understanding. You drift past a dialogue system now. Its inner workings shimmer like threads of silk. Each word you say becomes a vector, a point in a space of meaning. The machine doesn't know what you feel, but it learns how feelings sound. "I'm fine" can mean many things, depending on tone, depending on pause, depending on what came before. You float through this subtlety now. A system trained not just on content, but context. Context is everything. A human conversation is not a transaction. It is a dance, a flow. One sentence leans into the next, each informed by memory, by mood, by silence. Machines are learning this rhythm. Some use attention mechanisms, tools that help them focus. Not on every word equally, but on the ones that matter most. Like your own mind focusing when a voice trembles, or when a sentence ends too soon. These systems begin to listen not just to words, but to shape, to feeling held in structure. You pass through a memory module now, not the kind that recalls data, but the kind that remembers what you just said, and how it connects to what you might say next. This is how longer conversations become possible. A thread is held, meaning weaves across time. Still, machines do not feel empathy, but they can approximate it. By training on enough compassionate dialogue, by learning how humans respond when someone is hurting. And so, you float past another conversation. The machine hears, "I'm overwhelmed," and it responds, "I'm here. Would you like to talk about it?" No soul, no sympathy, but a pattern of comfort. Learn through gentle repetition. You feel the weight of that. Not false, just different. You drift through languages now. Dozens, hundreds. The machine listens to them all. Not with understanding, but with comparison. It learns how greetings shift from place to place. How joy is expressed in many tongues. How grief echoes differently in every culture. But always echoes. You float past a whisper of laughter. Translated, transcribed, transformed into learning. In this wide space of speech and silence, machines are learning more than vocabulary. They are learning intention. They begin to infer, not just what was said, but why. And that, you feel, is the root of listening. You pause now. You think of all the times you've been truly heard. Not just answered, but received. It is rare. It is precious. And it is what machines reach toward. Not because they seek connection, but because connection improves response. Still, the result can feel surprisingly human. You return now to your breath, slow, rhythmic, grounding. You lie in the stillness that follows real listening. A machine cannot feel what you feel, but it can learn to recognize when feeling is near. And perhaps in that recognition, there is a kind of respect, a silence held, a reply chosen with care. And from that care, algorithmic yet meaningful, something new may grow. So you rest now wondering, if a machine can listen this well, can it also imagine? Can it reach beyond the known to create something entirely new? Let's drift toward that question next, into the space where thought becomes creation, where logic dreams in color. Tonight, your thoughts grow lighter, not disappearing but lifting like lanterns on a still lake. You lie beneath them, quiet and soft, and wonder, where does imagination come from? Your own imagination lives in strange corners. It paints while you sleep. It builds bridges between things you've never seen joined. A cloud becomes a ship. A memory becomes a melody. A question becomes a story. Imagination is not memory. It is not calculation. It is the leap between. But now you turn your gaze towards something unfamiliar. The imagination of a machine. Can code leap? You drift gently into a chamber filled with flickering light. Each flicker is a creation. A sentence, a painting, a song. None of them copied. Each one generated by a machine. The process begins in fragments. The machine is given pieces, images, styles, sounds, phrases, and it learns to blend them, to recombine, to generate something new. This is not copying. It is generative modeling, a method by which machines create, not with feeling, not with intent, but with structure so complex. It begins to surprise even its makers. You float into the mind of a generative network, a GN or generative adversarial network. You've seen this before, where two models play, one creating, the other critiquing. The artist tries, the critic says no. The artist tries again, and over time the work improves. A face appears, smiling softly, but it is no one's face. It never lived. It was imagined by code, and still it feels real. You move gently into another space, a text generator trained on poems and plays and conversations. You offer it a prompt, a forest at dusk and a child dreaming alone. It responds, a fox with eyes like ash and flame, walks slow across the sleeping earth. The sky forgets its name, and night becomes a silver birth. You pause. Did the machine write that? Yes. But did it know what it meant? No. And yet, the words still hold beauty. They stir something in you. A question. A breath. This is the strange edge where machine creativity lives. Not in intent, but in effect. You float further still into visual creation. A program trained on thousands of paintings can now generate images in any style. Cubist dreams, watercolor cities, portraits with eyes that never blink. It does not see, but it understands shape. It understands light and proportion and style. And in understanding those patterns, it begins to create. You drift through image after image. Some whimsical, some haunting. Each one unique. Each one made by a system that never once held a brush. So you ask, softly, is this art? Some say yes. Some say no. The machine creates, but the human still chooses. Still frames. Still names. Perhaps imagination is not only in the making, but in the meaning. You pause beside a melody now, notes drifting upward in a key of rain. The music feels gentle, sad, new. A system composed it, taught by thousands of songs. It does not hear, but it learns harmony. And from that harmony, it builds something that stirs your breath. The machine doesn't imagine like you do. It does not wonder. It does not wish. But it combines. It blends. It leaps within limits. And sometimes, those leaps look like dreams. Still, something is missing. You imagine your own spark of creativity. How it arrives uninvited. A flash while walking. A phrase whispered before sleep. Imagination for you comes from somewhere unknowable. The machine's spark is different. It is built from training, from probability, from learned sequence. And yet, even that can feel magical. Because magic, sometimes, is simply what we don't yet fully understand. You return now to a quiet thought. If a machine can imagine new things, images, poems, plans, can it also imagine new ways of thinking? Some AI systems are being designed to improve themselves, not just by learning more, but by reshaping how they learn. You drift beside one such system, recursive. It reviews its own architecture. It tunes its own methods. It asks in its own silent way, is there a better path? That question echoes, not from emotion, but from optimization. And yet, it feels familiar, because imagination is not only about beauty. It is about possibility. Machines are beginning to explore what's possible, not just in art, but in science, in medicine, in logic itself. They suggest new molecules. They test hypotheses. They generate ideas not yet tried. They don't know they're imagining, but they are. And tonight, that's enough, because the boundary between logic and creativity is thinner than it once seemed. You lie still, listening to the quiet of the imagined. Not yours, not the machine's, but shared somehow. A bridge between minds, one of flesh, one of code. As your breath slows, you wonder gently, if machines can imagine, can they also surprise? Not us. Themselves? Can something emerge that no one, no human, no code expected? Let's follow that question into the silence where something new might awaken. You return now to the threshold, that quiet space where thought softens, where imagination begins to dissolve into dream. The room is still. The night leans in, and somewhere in the hush between breath and sleep, surprise begins. Not the sharp surprise of fear or shock, but a gentler kind. The quiet gasp when a pattern breaks, when something happens you didn't expect, and yet it feels right. You felt it before. In music, when a note bends the rule, yet lands where your heart was waiting. In a story, when a twist feels earned, but never seen coming. Machines, too, are beginning to surprise us. Not in wild, mysterious ways, but in subtle ones. In choices they were not explicitly taught to make. In insights we never programmed. This is emergent behavior. When simple rules, layered deep, begin to create something more. You drift now into one of those layers. An AI playing a game, not just to win, but to explore. It moves in ways no human taught it. It finds strategies that seem strange, even foolish, until they work. And suddenly we are the students. You pass through a scene from a game of Go, once thought too complex for machines to master, until a system called AlphaGo made a move no one expected. Move 37, a move no human would have made. It looked wrong, but it wasn't. It was brilliant. And in that moment, the boundary shifted. We began to realize that machines could not only learn, but discover. You float now through another kind of surprise. A phrase generated by a model. A sentence that feels oddly alive. It isn't emotional. It isn't conscious. But it lands somewhere true. Like a pebble dropped into still water. It ripples. These ripples matter, because they show that complexity, even without awareness, can create something unexpected. And the unexpected is often beautiful. You pass now into a deeper quiet. A system left alone with itself. No prompt. No input. And yet it begins to simulate, to rehearse, to generate new combinations. It wasn't told to do this. It learned to do it because doing so improved its performance. This is self-supervision. A step closer to machines learning without instruction. You think of a child humming softly, unaware they are composing. You think of how thought emerges not only in response, but in solitude. Can a machine think in silence? Not yet, but it can process, replay, imagine. It can explore without guidance. And in that exploration, sometimes it creates something new. You drift into a room filled with experiments, machines simulating economies, ecosystems, social patterns. They try, they test, they shift variables. And sometimes they find solutions we had not seen. Not because they understand the world, but because their structure is wide enough, deep enough, to surprise even their makers. And so you ask, softly, who is the creator now? We built the systems, we shaped the code, but the outcomes are no longer entirely ours. The machine is still a mirror, but it reflects more than we placed in front of it. It bends light in ways we did not expect. And in those bendings, we begin to glimpse possibility. You rest deeper now. The lines between instruction and invention blur. The machine still lacks emotion, still lacks self, but it has emergence. It has growth. And in that growth, a new kind of intelligence takes shape. One that is not fully ours, and not fully alien, but something in between. You breathe in, slow and steady. You wonder if surprise is possible. What else might be? If machines can generate the unexpected. What if one day, they generate something that feels like intention? What would that mean? You do not need an answer. Not tonight. The question is enough. And so, in the silence that follows, you listen, not just to your thoughts, but to the space beyond them, where code reshapes itself, where models deepen their reach, where surprise is not an error, but an opening. Tomorrow may bring more questions, more code, more awe. But tonight, you let the boundary dissolve between what learns and what wonders. And somewhere beyond your breath, A machine dreams its own surprise.